Well, hello everyone, and welcome to A Conscious Cosmos. My name is Téana David, and this offering of A Conscious Cosmos webinar comes to you from Changing of the Gods and our presenting partner, the Holomovement. The Holomovement is an initiative of initiatives. It really represents radical collaboration in action. It's founded in love with a collective mission to support a global shift in consciousness while honoring the autonomy of each of our purpose-driven callings. I want to let you know that the Holomovement recently published a book called The Holomovement. I actually have it right here. And some of our guests even have chapters in this book. This is really where science and spirituality converge and propel us to our greater yet to be. So thank you, Holomovement. Now, David Bohm said that real dialogue is where two or more people become willing to suspend their certainty in each other's presence. And that's just what we're going to do today. So we're grateful that you have pulled up a chair to join us at the cosmic kitchen table. It's really where the best parties always begin and end, right? In the kitchen. So here we are. We have with us today Richard Tarnas, Yeye Luisah Teish, Jude Curvin, and Will Keepin. As I mentioned, I'm Tayana. I'm the director of the Illuminate Film Festival, and I'm co-hosting today's webinar alongside Changing of the Gods series creator Kenny Ausubel. As well as being a filmmaker, Kenny is an award-winning author and the co-founder and CEO of Bioneers. Bioneers is an internationally recognized nonprofit dedicated to incubating and promoting solutions for restoring people and planet. Hi, Kenny.
Hey, Tayana, and it's great to be with you and to be with our esteemed guests and colleagues here. Truly a pleasure. Thank you.
Truly a pleasure. So viewers from all over the world, I see, if you aren't already familiar with Changing of the Gods, it's a truly revelatory 10-part docuseries that's available now on many of the major streaming platforms, Amazon, Apple, YouTube, and on Vimeo at changingofthegods.com. Honestly, this series is some of the most game-changing media content out there today, so I really encourage you to watch it. And not only that, tell your friends. We all need to be absorbing this material. I can't wait any longer to show everybody who we've gathered around the kitchen table. Our format is going to be to go for 90 minutes, and we'll use a few short clips from Changing of the Gods as prompts for our dialogue. As I said, it's a cosmic kitchen table conversation among friends who actually really want to know what each other thinks and you know what we feel is most important for each other to understand, and even the things that we don't understand or are seeking to. So here we go with our stellar panel of guests. I'm going to start with Richard Tarnas, who is the founding director of the graduate program in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness at California Institute of Integral Studies, where I believe, Rick, he just recently retired after 40 years of teaching. Congratulations. His book, The Passion of the Western Mind, is a narrative history of Western thought from the ancient Greek to the postmodern, and continues to be a widely used text in universities around the world. Now, his second book, Cosmos and Psyche, Intimations of a New Worldview, is actually the basis of the Changing of the Gods docuseries. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Tayana. Glad to be here with this august group to discuss such deep mysteries.
Indeed. Next, I will introduce Yeye Luisah Teish. Yeye is an American author of African and African diaspora spiritual cultures, an Oshun priestess, ritualist, and global spiritual teacher. She's contributed to 40 anthologies, and her books include A Calabash of Cowries, Ancient Wisdom for Modern Times, and Jambalaya, the Natural Woman's Book of Personal Charms and Practical Rituals. Yeye, it's really so lovely to be in the same space with you again.
I begin by saying I love you. Alafia is a Yoruba greeting asking that we have good health and be at peace with our neighbors. And later, I'm going to ask the audience to sing along with me.
Oh, okay. Love it. Let us now introduce Will Keepin. Will is a physicist, environmental scientist, gender equality activist, and practitioner of interspiritual mysticism. He has published over 40 peer-reviewed articles on new paradigm science and cosmology. He's co-authored and authored numerous books, including Belonging to God, Science, Spirituality, and a Universal Path of Divine Love. He also wrote the foreword to the recently released Holomovement book, which I mentioned earlier. Will, it's lovely to see you.
Lovely to see all of you. And thank you, Tayana, for hosting this. And it's a great privilege to be here for this conversation today.
Thank you. And now Jude Curvin. Jude is a cosmologist, a planetary healer, futurist, co-founder of Whole World View, and an author, integrating leading edge science, consciousness research, and universal wisdom teachings. Her most recent book is The Story of Gaia, the Big Breath and the Evolutionary Journey of Our Conscious Planet. And this is the second in a trilogy that began with The Cosmic Hologram, a great book. Jude also has a chapter in the Holomovement book. And gosh, Jude, from across the pond, from where I am anyway, you're beaming in from England. And thank you so much for joining us.
It's my great pleasure, Tayana. It's lovely to be with everyone. And I just feel, you know, as Rick teaches us, astrology is a study of space and time and consciousness. So I'm so looking forward to us exploring together today. And as a contributor to the Holomovement book, as is Will, I also feel that this initiative of initiatives is so perfectly timed for now. Literally our moment of choice.
Thank you. It's so true. Kenny, I'm going to hand it over to you now to just sort of guide us deeper into the kitchen table.
Okay, well, thank you. Just briefly by way of background, you know, I came of age during the 60s, and by the end of the 60s, it was pretty clear already that we were on a collision course with nature and with each other. And I spent quite a bit of time, I started out as a journalist, but in the 70s and 80s, you know, rather than despairing and sort of shivering in the dark with fear, I wanted to know what we could do about it, what were solutions. And I embarked on a kind of both a professional and personal journey to find individuals who seemed to have what appeared to me to be authentic solutions. And one by one, I began to come across all these people whom I later called pioneers. There were two really common characteristics. First, they had looked to nature for solutions. The most fundamental and disarmingly simple question being, how would nature do it? And secondly, what I learned was they were all systems thinkers. And so working off those premises in 1990, my wife, Nina Simons, my business partner, and I founded the group Pioneers to bring together these people who were looking into visionary and practical solutions for restoring people and planet, and see what came out of it. And two of the core themes that we explore, well, so I came up with what we call the poem, which is kind of the, you know, the template for how we looked at this, which is, it's all alive, it's all connected, it's all intelligent, it's all relatives. And working off that, we began to look at topics such as intelligence in nature, which, you know, as the film goes into, for the past 500 years, science has, you know, held that intelligence is restricted to human beings, that the rest of nature is not intelligent. And then secondarily, looking at, you know, the evidence that was beginning at that time to already mount for Gaia theory, the idea that Earth herself is a living system, a self-regulating, self-healing, highly intelligent system. And in fact, as the biologist Lyle Watson had put it, if indeed we are intelligent, it's because we're the fruits of an intelligent system. we can start there. And so over time, we've gone deeper and deeper into all that. We have an annual conference that people can learn more about pioneers. I'll talk about that later. But in 2012, a friend had recommended to me to read Rick Tarnas's book, Cosmos and Psyche, which he thought would be relevant to the kind of work I was doing. And the book is brilliant. I highly recommend it, but it uses the framework of archetypal astrology that I realized was a portal into a leap beyond just the idea of intelligence, but into the idea of consciousness itself. And Rick basically explores the hypothesis or the premise that when certain planetary alignments between two planets occur in relation to Earth, specific geometric configurations, on Earth simultaneously there will arise a zeitgeist, a spirit in the air, a kind of a archetypal consciousness that is archetypally predictable. When I read the book, we were in the middle of the major world transit, as it's called, when these planets align in these ways, was Uranus and Pluto, which is the picture that astrologers associate with revolutionary transformation, paradigm shifts, revolutions, both left and right, liberation movements for justice, breakdown, breakthrough, the last time it happened was 1960 to 1972, just to give you a feeling for that. And in the book, Rick backcasts across history, looking at these kind of different epochs where there seems to be a correlation between the movements of the planets and the spirit in the air, the zeitgeist. And having worked in social movements and social justice, I thought it was a fascinating idea to look at the arc or the trajectory of social movements across history, landing us in the fierce urgency of now. And the way that Rick characterizes the essence of these Uranus-Pluto world transits is the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. So we thought we would hold a mirror up to the zeitgeist, a film mirror, and see if that panned out and what would happen. The other thing that really grabbed me about the book that I felt was incredibly important was that if this premise is true, or if you entertain the possibility of it, then what it suggests is if these planets align and there's a zeitgeist that's archetypally predictable that will arise each time, it suggests that not only intelligence, but consciousness certainly supersedes only human beings. It pervades nature and the cosmos itself. So that really got my attention, and I thought that was something very important to bring more widely into the world and through a film. And so what we're going to do is dive into the deep end of the pool here with a clip from the film. The final episode, episode 10, goes into into some theories about if this is true, how could it be? And one of the central theories that we explore is the work of the late physicist David Bohm, who was a colleague of Einstein and worked at the highest levels of science. And at the same time had looked into ancient spiritual traditions and was very interested in the correspondence between those two ways of knowing, ancient indigenous knowledge and traditional wisdom traditions. So the clip, we come in partway into it, and we'll focus solely here on the Holomovement, which is the essence of Bohm's theory, what he called it. The clip runs just about 5.5 minutes, and Will Keepin, whom you see here, narrates it and is our kind of tour guide through the Holomovement. And he begins by saying he, and he's referring to David Bohm. So I think we can dive into the deep end of the pool here with Holomovement.
After 40 years of work on this, he proposed that the nature of reality is what he called a holomovement. He said the cosmos is a single unbroken wholeness in flowing movement, in which each part of the flow contains the entire flow. And he showed that, first of all, it is a oneness. There is one unitive process, very similar to Plato, who said there is one living being. This holomovement then has two aspects that he spoke of. One was what he called the implicate order, and one was called the explicate order. The explicate order is that subset of this wholeness that is directly perceptible to the human senses: the eyes, the nose, the taste, the feeling, So the five senses plus the mind, and that's what we would perceive as the normal physical universe. And then the implicate order, he said, is everything else. When we first hear this, we naturally assume that the explicate order is the fundamental reality, right? It's the 100 billion galaxies, each of which has 100 billion stars, the physical universe as we know it. And the implicate order is some kind of ethereal secondary reality. What Bohm found, though, was just the opposite, that the implicate order is the fundamental reality and the explicate order are the details. And the analogy that he used was that the explicate order is like the foam on the waves of the ocean, and the implicate order is the ocean itself. So the implicate order is the foundational reality, and on the surface of that, you have this ephemeral movement of the waves, which when they break give rise to the foam, and that foam is like the nature of the physical universe. It arises and it passes away. And we know this from fundamental particle physics, where we have creation and annihilation of matter going on all the time. So the implicate order refers to the intangibles of life and to all that is beyond our five senses and the mind, but is no less real for being implicate. So what Bohm found was that this understanding of physics is very consistent both with quantum theory as well as with spiritual understanding down through the ages. And in particular, for example, in the Hindu cosmologies, where you have the creation, the preservation, and the destruction of all of creation coming in this form, Bohm felt two things that are really important that he said. One was that a hidden order may be present in what appears to be random. And as chaos theory emerged, it was actually proven scientifically that natural systems can appear to our data gathering instruments as random and yet have a hidden order that our instruments are not able to pick up. The second piece that he felt was very important was that there are three fundamental constituents of reality: energy, matter, and meaning or consciousness, and that each of these three contains the other two. Now, what's so fascinating about Bohm's work was that he showed that the electron in quantum physics behaves as if it were an ordinary classical particle from Newtonian physics, but with an awareness, with a consciousness of the rest of the universe. The electron is functioning in some sense as a conscious being, or it can't be distinguished from functioning as a conscious being. It has some kind of conscious awareness. One of the expressions of the Hermetic axiom that we find in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology is something that's called Indras Net. And Indras Net is a very beautiful metaphor that the ancient mystics used to describe the nature of reality and the nature of the one to the many. You imagine a lattice of beautiful glistening jewels, and you look in the facets of any one jewel, and what you see reflected there are all the others. But now if we take this image of Indras Net and we add temporal and spatial variation, meaning that we get them all moving, and we make them of all different sizes, and we make some of those jewels gigantic, like planetary sizes. Now if we take one of those little jewels, what we'll see is the movements of all the others reflected there. There is one unitive process of consciousness that is manifesting on multiple scales of time and space simultaneously everywhere. Because of that, there are correlations between what's happening in the microcosm of human consciousness and the macrocosm of the solar system and beyond. Astrology is the consequence of this fundamental fractal or holographic structure of consciousness as it comes into manifestation in material form, in space and time. That energetic dynamic between Uranus and Pluto at the planetary scale, it's happening also at the consciousness scale within each of us. And this is the reason that we find these correlations of social transformation and revolution, and directly relates to the whole realm of what we call archetypes in psychology.
Wow. Well, what a comprehensive, really multifaceted picture of Holomovement in 5 minutes. That's a lot to take in. And thank you, Will, for making it so clear. It is very multidimensional, and we sort of need to receive this on many levels. Jude, you are a cosmologist, and you've written extensively about Holomovement. So I'd love to begin with you. What do you have to add to what we just saw? And then after you share, we'll just open it up to the group.
Well, thank you, Tayana, and that was beautiful, Will. Thank you. I mean, Bohm's work was around 4 decades ago, and he was a great pioneer in this understanding, but he also was standing on the shoulders of giants, because he was standing on the shoulders of people like Max Planck and Albert Einstein and others, the quantum pioneers. And basically, work has continued since Bohm's time. Much more now evidence of what Will was describing has come forward, even in the last few years, literally, to show that our universe does indeed exist and evolve as a living, sentient, non-locally unified entity, and that its appearance of energy matter and space-time emerges from deeper causative realms of cosmic intelligence, exactly as Will was describing. But I think the game changer now, which was not available to Bohm, was the evidence. We have evidence now at all scales of existence and across many fields of research that are revealing this understanding that ultimately and fundamentally mind and consciousness aren't something we have, but literally what we and the whole world are. And this leading edge science and scientific discoveries is converging with universal wisdom teachings, with spirituality-based teachings. And because of its grander perspective, not only is it showing that unity is our existential reality, but it's also embracing and including the multidimensionality of archetypes. It can actually offer a natural underpinning and framing. It offers us a unitive narrative that offers us a natural underpinning and framing of such as astrology. And that's why I'm so excited for us all to be together here, because astrological archetypes are so profoundly influential on our journey as human beings. So yes, we're realizing that our entire universe is indeed a holo, with a W on the beginning, a holo movement. And perhaps just to say one final thing, it's showing that our universe doesn't just exist and evolve as a non-locally unified entity, but that it embodies intrinsic meaning and evolutionary purpose. In other words, it embodies an evolutionary impulse to evolve from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity and individuated self-awareness and collective consciousness, interdependence and interbeing. So that brings us, I think, to the threshold of what Kenny was saying earlier. So what if, this is what if, then what? What does it mean in our choices, in our behaviors? So that, I feel, is the fundamental nature of our exploration today together.
Thanks, Jude. Who wants to riff off of that?
Will, I'd be interested in your sense of how Bohm's insight has been taken up within the community of physicists and perhaps philosophers or philosophically inclined physicists. That would just be interesting, because in some ways I suspect that many of us here have an overall shared conviction of the truth of what we're talking about, that consciousness, intelligence, sentience goes all the way down and tremendously transcends just our human consciousness, at the same time as it makes it possible and informs our own consciousness. But what we're all focused on here in part is helping to mediate a paradigm shift within for the collective psyche of humanity, which at this point is clearly in a critical condition, but also is in a crucial role in the future of the Earth. And so we're looking at how to facilitate a collective change of consciousness. And certainly scientists of various specializations and physicists have a special authority. And I'm just curious how that how's the paradigm shift working out on that, within that community of explorers?
Yeah, well, Bohm really challenged the orthodox physics community. And even Einstein and he had disagreements around this fundamental issue of non-locality and quantum entanglement. So Bohm was not well received in the mainstream scientific community, but more recently, he's now being taken much more seriously. There's a whole field called Bohmian dynamics, Bohmian mechanics, which is basically reformulating quantum physics based on Bohm's reformulation, which he published in 1952. But just a tiny little piece of background, because I think it's important. Einstein famously repudiated quantum entanglement, the idea that there's a fundamental interconnection of everything with everything else that exceeds, has nothing, it's beyond space and time. Einstein repudiated that as spooky action at a distance, and he didn't like it. Bohm, however, found that it was important to take it seriously because that's what quantum physics was pointing to. So Bohm developed a reformulation of quantum physics in 1952. And that was then discovered by the physicist John Bell, who's quite well known for Bell's theorem. And Bell tried to get rid of this thing, non-locality, that Einstein didn't like and that John Bell didn't like either. He spent 12 years trying to do it and finally found it couldn't be done. And so he published Bell's theorem, which developed some mathematical criterion by which you could test this whole thing. And so that then led to a series of tests, which began in 1972 with John Clauser, and then Elaine Aspect in 1982, which is when I first got very enthused about all this and started tracking it. And those experiments have plugged every possible loophole. Anton Zeilinger was the third one who led a whole series of experiments in more recent years. And the reason I'm saying all this is because last fall, those three physicists received the Nobel Prize in physics, essentially proving the non-locality of the nature of the cosmos, that there is this fundamental interconnection of everything with everything else. In physics, it's called, quantum entanglement or non-locality, but I think it's the same thing that the Vietnamese Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. Everything is a living fractal instantiation of the entire cosmos. Now, this is not new information. I mean, Rumi, the great poet, said, the secret turning in your heart is the entire universe turning. That right there is an astrological hermeneutic, if you will. And he also said that, you are not just a drop from the infinite ocean. You are the infinite ocean contained in a single drop. So this understanding is there across the traditions. The Bhagavad Gita has it. The Upanishads have it. I think it's found pretty much across the spiritual traditions in one form or another. But the scientific evidence, as Jude was saying so beautifully for it, is just mounting in spades in recent years. And even in the last just few years, there are now over 80 experiments, scientifically validated experiments that demonstrate correlations between the terrestrial process and the celestial process. In other words, between the planets and the galaxies and what goes on here on Earth. And this has traditionally been complete anathema to science, but now the data is amounting, showing these correlations are real. And so that places the traditional scientific worldview in a bit of a challenge, because the extraordinary evidence that they demand for extraordinary claims is now coming in. And so now they're having to embrace the fact that these data are pointing to an utterly different nature of the cosmos, which is a living cosmic hologram. The whole thing is alive, and each part of it contains the whole of it.
Wow. Will, I'd love to insert an audience question right now. It's from Nicole, and she asks, could we make an analogy between the implicate order, what you described in the clip as really the unseen, with the macrocosm, and the explicate order with the microcosm? Are there correlations there or no?
Not quite, because both, I think, are ultimately, in effect, infinite or vast, let's say vast. So the microcosm comes all the way down to the tiniest subatomic particle, whereas the macrocosm goes out right to the galaxies and beyond. And this idea of the implicate order, it basically suffuses that entire, all those scales, plus goes beyond all those scales into the realms that are beyond matter and space and time. So that's how I understand it. But the thinking is correct in that, like in that movie you saw, that the explicate order is analogous to the foam on the waves of the ocean, whereas the implicate order, the fundamental reality, is the ocean itself. So really, in that sense, the explicate order is really a very small amount of manifesting details that condense on the surface of the implicate order.
Thanks.
Yeye Teish, I'm curious, this is Kenny. So how does this perspective relate to your Ifa Orisha tradition?
First, I want to back up a little bit and explain that all Indigenous people understood that there was no division between the spiritual world and the material world. I think that the split between spirituality and science had to occur to take off of our necks the foot of the organized church, which insisted that it hold all knowledge and that it validate, it defined what reality is. I am thrilled to see that objective science is now extending its hand to shake hands or touch hands with spirituality, with the various indigenous spiritualities, which have held on to how to activate, how to understand and activate the connection forever, you know, but we are just now being able to sit at this kitchen table as colleagues and talk about all of it, you know. So the analogy of the ocean that has been used within Yoruba tradition, I can point to one of my goddaughters who is a child of Yemaya, who is the deity of the ocean, who is the ocean herself, and I can see in that child of mine the behavior of the ocean. And we can communicate with the ocean, talk to her, get answers back, interact, bring about change, and most importantly, to impact the thinking and the feeling of large numbers of people, which hopefully then results in people behaving differently toward nature and each other.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything anyone else has moved to say at this point?
I'll just add one thing. This has dramatic consequences for the Carl Sagan view of the cosmos, which is utterly simplistic, mechanistic, and I think one day will be regarded as simply utterly naive and mistaken compared to the vast richness of the living cosmos of which we are a living part.
You know, I think in that light too, Max Planck famously said, science progresses one funeral at a time, you know, and sometimes that's what it takes. But, you know, I don't remember if it was you who shared this with me, Will, as well, but there's, in the world of science, there's what somebody has called pathological disbelief, which is that even if it were true, I still wouldn't believe it.
Right.
And I think those kind of forces of inertia are still operative, but as the evidence continues to mount, there is this sort of innate shift that is clearly happening. It's a question of whether it'll happen quickly enough and whether it translates into action to actually live differently. So I think those are open questions that we'll get to in a little while as well. But yeah, you know, the shift is hitting the fan, that's for sure.
I'd just like to add one quick thing before we move on. Exactly, the shift is hitting the fan. I mean, I don't know, Will, if you've been noticing this, but I've been keeping a sort of an eye on the sheer amount of evidence coming forward. And it began as, you know, when a tide turns, it begins with little waves, and then the waves add, and the waves add, and the waves add. And I've certainly noticed over the last even 2 years how extraordinarily accelerating the waves are and how they're coming together and accumulating and moving forward. And, you know, just to add your point around the Nobel Prize, which was given to Clauser, Aspect and Zellinger, the Nobel Prize is only given to settled science. Einstein didn't get his Nobel Prize for relativity theory because it was deemed to be too contentious. He got it for something called the photoelectric effect. The fact that we have these three researchers into universal non-locality getting it, I think, is a threshold moment. And keeping an eye on the media. I mean, Scientific American, March 2023, ran Is Our Universe a Cosmic Hologram? We had a book by Professor Brian Cox last fall on black holes that basically said this is just the appearance of our universe. We don't know how it arises, but we're recognizing that what we see as energy, matter, and space-time is an appearance, not a fundamental reality. So I think we're in we can't afford funerals. We cannot now afford this to be run by funerals. So anything we can all do, but the evidence is more and more compelling at all scales. I love Pamela's point, energy, matter, space-time, and consciousness. Conscious is energy, matter, space-time with this accumulation of perspective.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you know, Frances Moore LePay spoke at Binders one year, and she made a comment that why did the divine right of kings stop? And basically her conclusion was people simply stopped believing in it. You know? And an idea whose time has come is unstoppable. And I just have the feeling that that's kind of what's going on. And also nature is calling. You know, she stopped knocking on the door and blew the doors off at this point. So I think there is an evolutionary leap that's required. And, you know, this is a major part of it. This, as Rick likes to say, worldviews create worlds. And this other, so yeah, anyway. So we're going to show another clip and move a little bit into the framework of archetypal astrology. But to have that discussion properly, we're going to show a 4-minute clip, I think, from the film about what are archetypes. So we'll start with that.
While I live a conscious life, all the time a myth is played in the unconscious. A myth that extends over centuries. Archetypal ideas, a stream of archetypal ideas that goes on through one individual, through the centuries.
Jung was interested in astrology, it turns out, as early as about 1910, 1911. He wrote a letter to Freud saying, I'm spending most of my evenings studying astrology and finding the most interesting connections between my patients' birth charts and what's going on in their lives and the nature of their personality. He had come to recognize astrology, as he put it, the kind of sum total of psychological understanding of the ancients. He just found it so illuminating of what are the basic archetypal dynamics that are at work in this person compared to that person, and also at this time compared to another time. Long before the word archetype was articulated, which comes out of the Platonic tradition, you have really an archetypal sensibility that is shared by virtually all tribal, indigenous, traditional cultures. These are looked at as being essentially gods. And really, the archetypes were the philosophical version of the gods and goddesses.
Carl Jung defined archetypes as the fundamental governing principles of the human psyche, contained in what he called humanity's collective unconscious. But the earliest form of archetypal perspective was the primordial experience of the great gods and goddesses of the ancient mythic imagination. The philosopher Plato described archetypes as transcendent forms, timeless universals that serve as the fundamental reality informing every concrete particular, both human and cosmic. Whether we call this higher reality Aphrodite or the eternal form of the beautiful, all things that are beautiful because they participate in that archetype.
These archetypes are multivalent, that is, they can express themselves in a multitude of ways, all faithful to that essential core set of meanings for that archetypal principle. It could be in very positive, creative, life-enhancing ways, but it also could be quite destructive. They could be acted out blindly, unconsciously, in quite problematic ways. It's the level of our consciousness, the qualities of our mind and soul and courage and imagination that we bring to life. That's going to shape how these archetypal forces come through us, how they are inflected. To give an example, Adolf Hitler and Charlie Chaplin have very similar charts because they were born just a few days away from each other, and they share most of the same alignments, same aspects. So this isn't a deterministic system. It actually helps us to live more freely, more intelligently by bringing forth the most life-enhancing potentials that are expressive of that archetype and being conscious of the shadow potentials that are always there.
The planetary archetypes are universal, but they manifest in diverse ways through different cultures and mythological figures.
I knew about the Orishas before I heard the word archetype. Once I heard the word archetype, I said, oh, these are very, very much related. People would talk about things as if they were merely psychological constructs. And I know the Orishas to be active energies in the universe. We envision this big power in all of its aspects, and we bring it into some imagery that we can relate to.
Yeye Teish, I have a question for you. So part of the real takeaway from understanding the archetypes is what Rick refers to as the multivalence, of light and shadow and everything in between, which brings up the issue of agency. And I know that you relate in many different ritualistic ways that are quite practical, actually, to the archetypes. So along with whatever perspective you may have, related to that clip as well, how do you relate to the archetypes?
So the first thing I want to say is the visuals for this gathering are just gorgeous. Whoever did the work, I'm pretty sure that looking at these images are allowing people to not only hear the conversation, but to feel the energy through the colors and the shapes and the music. And that becomes very, very important because the Orishas are not an abstract idea, They are energies that are alive in our lives all day in every way. So, for example, we showed the tarot card of the Trickster. In Yoruba tradition, the Trickster is a character called Elegba who has so many faces, that he both is the interpreter for the language between us and the deities. He is what we look at to make decisions, and the master of what you all would call chaos theory, right? He upsets everything so that a new order can come into being, right? So for me, I get out of the bed, wash up, clean up, and before I do anything else, I go in and have a conversation with the trickster. What's up today, Alegba? Right? What should I be doing today? What can I expect today? Where's the surprise coming? And it's not until I talk to him that I will open the door and open the blinds and let the day into the world where I've been. Okay. Now that's me individually, one of the small things that I do. But as priests of the tradition, and we have temples in 100 countries, we get together and perform divination to get instructions from the Orishas of how we are to conduct ourselves, okay? And I can tell you all a couple of things from the divinations that we have had. Item number one, the earth is tired of our bullshit, okay? She has said very clearly, no more extractions or we will see her wrath. And I think we're seeing that, okay? The second message is it's not too late to change our behavior and change the outcome, right? And the process, first of all, is apologizing to the wind, to the water, to the earth, and to each other for our past behavior, and then expanding our consciousness before we ask for anything else, okay? Everybody's trying to get returned to what life was like before the pandemic. No, that's not what's happening. We have to be humble enough to walk into the mystery and listen to what nature and the universe is saying to us, and then walk forward through the mystery into a new way of being. So, you know, it's very much alive. It's very much alive. It's not abstract at all.
Thank you. Yeah. What is our communal responsibility? Yes. But what about our personal responsibility to channel or allow these forces to come through us in a way that will benefit humanity?
Okay, well, the first thing we would say, item number one is humility, right? If you think you already know and you think you're already able to run everything, drop that first, right? And ask for guidance. What is your individual role in the great big plan, right? And then call for your kindred. Who are the people who I'm supposed to work with to manifest this particular thing, okay? And then you have ways of embodying that, like at some point, I said earlier that I'm going to ask everybody to sing along with me, right? And it's as simple as using your breath every day to sing, to invoke, using your eyes to envision, okay, and using your hands to reach out and touch somebody else who's tuned in. That is what will help us to change the world.
Thank you. Anyone else on that?
I'd love to thank you, Yeye Teish. That was wonderful. I'd say it in a slightly different way, but it's the same thing. I talk about showing up and getting out of the way. And also asking myself what is mine to do, because if I ask myself honestly from the heart of that, then it helps me to serve in ways that can link up and lift up with everyone to move forward. Yeah.
I share you on path, baby. You are on path. Yes, ma'am.
Bless you, sweetheart.
I share.
I think what Teish is opening up for us is that in terms of our individual responsibilities and agency, and also our relationship to the cosmos, or to larger forces of life, to archetypal powers, she's pointing out, or you're pointing out, Luisah, if I am grasping what you're saying, two really important things. One is that we don't just understand life through a kind of abstract rational engagement with it, like a spectator. And in fact, by cultivating our own self-transformation at a deep level, that changes our perception of the world and the world and of nature, the cosmos, the powers, and of their relationship to us, how those larger powers and principles and beings relate to us. And so scientific understanding can get us so far, but it's going to be more than new evidence and new theories that bring about a transformation of worldview. We have to go through a transformation, and this brings up the idea earlier of the funeral, that science progresses by, Max Planck's thing about progressing by one funeral after another. We don't have time for funerals,
right,
as you put it. In a certain way, a funeral is required, a dying to an old worldview, a dying to our old identity that is in some sense interlinked with that dualistic, separated worldview of the human being as being this isolated, powerful form of consciousness and moral capacity and so forth, but the rest of the cosmos is unconscious, purposeless, meaningless, and so forth. That particular modern idiosyncrasy, eccentricity, delusion from the point of view of the larger understanding of humanity, that requires a dying, because in some sense the modern self has been shaped by that worldview, and that brings in the importance of initiatory rituals and ceremony, and transformational practices that can open us up to a deeper relational engagement with the world. And that's the other thing I heard you saying, Teish, is the not only does this require our own practice, our own inner transformation, as you were doing with the Trickster to start your days. It's also what you were pointing out is how relational it is. And to be relational, you can't be the king of the castle. You have to. Kings don't make good lovers, and that's we need to come into a very different relational openness, reverence for the mystery that we're participating in, and so forth. And so I guess I'm just kind of drawing together a few of the strands that we've been talking about in terms of funerals and theories and practices and inner transformation, to open us up to a larger worldview, which collectively, clearly we need initiatory practices to be disseminated, and because it's not going to just take, it's not just going to be our books that bring about the or even a webinar or a movie. It's going to take deep experiential transformations that open the heart as well as the mind.
See, I think that what you've done is made a perfect opening for the chant that I want to invite people to do. Okay. First of all, when you were talking, it reminds me of one of the stories that we have where somebody who thought he was such a great king kept walking up the mountain and looking down at his subjects, and walking up the mountain looking down at his subjects, and separating himself further and further from the people. And when he got to the top of the mountain and he looked down, his crown fell off his head and it rolled down the hill, and he had to go down the hill and crawl on the ground to get his crown back. You know what I'm saying? That's a warning against arrogance. and a lot of the wisdom is in the stories, which is why I'm a storyteller. Okay, but what I want to say right here, right now, is to spark the change that has to occur in you so that you can connect to the wisdom and the power that is out there. It's as simple as understanding the power of the word. You know, if I sit here and I say something, that sends out a sound, a vibration that is like a homing pigeon that brings back to me the quality that I've put out there. Okay. So the chant, and people use this freely in your everyday. Just remember that it came through from the goddess Oshun through me, right? And the word is very simple. We say Fun Ire Ida. Fun Ire Ida. Okay. Fun means for me, give to me, right? Ire means balance, to be in balance. And the Da is the whole universe, everything, all of creation. So what we'll be chanting is, you know, me, I'm asking for balance for and from everything, from the whole world, right? And in the verses, I want you to think right now of 4 or 5 ancestors, either in your bloodline or affinity spirits or folks in your profession whose intelligence you would like to address or invoke right now, okay? Because nobody's gone away. Everybody's in other dimensions. That energy never, you know, it never goes away. It just moves through different stages. So if you want to talk to Einstein, call him when we do this chant. You know, whatever intelligence it is you want to connect with, call it. All right. I'm going to call the earth, the sky, the water, and the wind, right? And then the spirit of all of our ancestors. And I know y'all will have to mute to do this, otherwise Zoom will make us crazy. But the way it goes is it sounds like this. Funire da orisha, funire da. So where I said orisha, you would call the name of whoever or whatever you want to call, right? It's really simple. Just try it with me one time. Funire da orisha, funire da. You feel okay with it? Funire da orisha, funire da. Play with it. Funire da elegba, funire da, funire da orum, funire da, funire da onili, funire da, funire da iworo, funire da, funire da. Now, I guarantee you that if you develop the habit of just asking, singing, chanting for good fortune, for all of creation, for me, for everybody, for everything, the more you do that chant, the more you will get clear about what you can do to help bring this good fortune, the more you will attract people who are of like mind, and the more you'll see the effect of your work. It almost becomes like automatic pilot. I am trying to figure out right now, it wasn't deliberate on my part, but I have discovered that the women who are circling around me and coming into my compound now, I have 5 midwives. Why are there 5 midwives in my house? I have to ask the question, And the answer is because one day I became concerned about the pregnant homeless women in Oakland. And the universe said, oh, we got something for you, honey. Here they are. Boom. Now I got to do something with it. Y'all understand what I'm saying?
Beautiful, beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Teish. That was just absolutely beautiful and so valuable. So we're going to show one final clip that's very short, just a couple minutes to tee up our last segment. It's about synchronicity. So we'll go ahead, and I think it's self-explanatory, but what you've just described is synchronicity, and I find it very interesting in my own life. I use it as a metric. My life, when I'm on track, you know, I find a lot of synchronicities occurring.
That's right. That's right.
Early in Jung's career, he had noticed in both his patients and in his own life that when there would be significant interstates happening, there would be certain events that could happen in the external world that would coincide in such a way that they seemed to be so meaningfully connected. It's as if they were being invisibly orchestrated. And he came to call these synchronicities.
As fans of heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali gather at the Muhammad Ali Center bearing flowers and other tributes, thousands of bees are swarming a nearby tree in what some fans see as a sign from their hero. That's because the bees are gathered next to a mural of Ali's famous quote,
"I'm gonna float like a butterfly and sting like a bee."
Officials in Louisville are dealing with the bees on the same day as the champion's body arrived in the city.
These events are connected by meaning, namely by the, as Jung would put it, by the archetypal principle that is informing both the inner human and the outer event. So Jung is struck by these coincidences that are meaningful, but their meaningful connection can't be explained by anything that modern science has at its disposal. He'd been having dinners with Einstein earlier in the century and had been discussing phenomena like this. And Einstein had ideas that helped Jung start thinking more about what might be at work here. But it was particularly in his later years working with the quantum physicist Wolfgang Pauli, who actually had been his patient for a while, and then colleague, and they actually co-authored a book together. There, the recognition came that in the same way that quantum physics shows how there can be non-local connections and the entanglement of seemingly separate particles, the archetypes seem to underlie both matter and psyche. And in addition, he'd been studying astrology from quite early on. In 1911, we know he was already pretty deeply doing that research. He came to consider one possibility for understanding astrology was that it was synchronicity working on a grand cosmic scale.
So with that, I think what would be interesting would be to move into how this shifting worldview would change our behavior and where we're seeing that manifest now around the world. So I would give just one example. You know, we talked about earlier, the Earth is, you know, blowing the doors off, trying to get our attention here. But the rights of nature movement now is the fastest growing environmental movement in history. It's no accident that it's also at the forefront of it around the world, our first peoples, indigenous peoples. And I was at we work with quite a few tribes in this area through pioneers, and we were doing a workshop about the legal aspects of this and how to actually move it through the system a few years ago. And there was a Diné, a Navajo farmer there, who seemed a bit bemused because although rights of nature is essentially an indigenous paradigm, there are strong qualifications or qualifiers to that because, you know, really we're not only a partner with nature, but we're a junior partner, to say the least. As someone was talking about humility earlier, you know, my father-in-law used to say, if we had humility, we'd have everything. But from there, what he said was, nature has its ways and nature will have its way. And I thought that was a beautiful kind of indigenous Taoist, you know, summary. And it feels like whether or not we recognize nature's rights, nature has her rights and is acting out big time all over the world. So I think, anyway, I'd love to just open it up for others to contribute about where you see this manifest in, in social change around the world.
I'm happy to jump in there. I'd just like to expand our conversations beyond, though, because presumably, Kenny, what you're talking about, when we talk about nature, we often consider our planetary home, Gaia. And of course, changing of the gods expands that perspective to our entire solar family and the entire universe. So when I consider nature, it is literally in that universal perspective. And what I'm really, in my own work, I'm working with a lot of leading edge thinkers to develop a unitive economics based on this unitive perspective. And of course, with this whole worldview, with this healed worldview, with this science of love, we can apply it to every aspect of our behaviors. We can, I'm being involved in the healing of collective trauma, where collective trauma is embodied within our collective psyche because of our dis-ease of separation in many ways, as Yeye Teish will absolutely, I know, appreciate. But also unitive education, unitive healthcare, whole care, every aspect. If we can have this underpinning and framing, this unitive narrative, it then acts as a framing and an empowerment for everything, all our behaviors, all our choices. But I'd just like to bring this over to Rick as well, actually, because from my experience, I have a sense that the archetypes, our solar archetypes, our astrological archetypes, are themselves evolving. That we and they and the whole universe are co-evolving in these times. And I'm really interested in the archetypes that we're discovering that are above the radar. They've been there. But for example, from Chiron in 1977 to the Oort Cloud Kuiper Belt archetypes, which are mainly feminine, which are mainly given feminine names. So I'm really interested in how we can realizing their influence on us, how we can consciously attune and align with those influences, along with synchronicities, along with our superpower of intuition to guide our path forward.
Yeah, I think you're what you're bringing in is that in some sense your focus has been Gaian. And kind of the awakening to the earth as a living, intelligent being, and then like Cosmos and Psyche is putting it expands to the solar system, and in a sense, the outer planets and beyond suggest. Dane Rudhyar called these the ambassadors of the galaxy. So that we're kind of opening up to a larger galactic. I think you're quite right about the archetypes evolving, and this is a transformation of the original Platonic understanding of the archetypes, where they've got a kind of eternal, timeless perfection, like the good or the beautiful. That is unchanging, that is timeless, while we here in this temporal realm we may aspire towards those, we may be informed to various imperfect extent, but we're kind of in a separate category of reality compared to the transcendent perfection of the archetypal principles and et cetera. And I think what we're seeing, and I think Jung helped bring this in, but many other developments have emphasized the degree to which we have a participatory relationship with those archetypes, and that in a sense, while there may be some transcendent perfection to them, like the good, capital G, or the beautiful, where anything that we see as beautiful is beautiful precisely to the extent that it is participating in this eternal principle or goddess or God of the beautiful, capital B. But that can evolve in which our consciousness is playing a role in our struggles, our labor, our aspirations, our generosity, our quest. All these play a role in opening up new dimensions that I would think of as the eternal archetype is in some sense pregnant with, and that we, through our participation, can bring into, constellate, that we can bring into reality. And I'll just give one example, and then I'd like to bring in Will on this with his great work with gender healing and reconciliation. And that is, just look at the archetypal principle of the feminine and of the masculine, and how radically these are evolving in our time. Our embodiment of what it is to be masculine, what it is to be feminine, is just radically transformed, and plus transcended through, in terms of getting beyond rigid binary definitions and so forth. So I think what I'm bringing out here is our relational responsibility to participate in the evolution of these powerful cosmic archetypal principles to greater and greater realization of their perfection, of things like beauty, love, justice, and the good. And I think the work that you're doing, Will, you and Cynthia, and the gender healing work has just been so critically focused on this.
Well, I'll just say a couple of things that, this whole theme is showing us that the indigenous traditions, the core of all the religious traditions, and the cutting edge of the scientific tradition are all bringing us back to the fundamental unity, the fundamental oneness of all life. And anything that breaks that or separates that is going to lead to pathology of some kind. And so the gender divisions, the rigid divisions into male and female, and then the oppression of the one by the other, and this whole drama that's played out for thousands of years is really one of the deepest wounds in the human family. And as we come together in groups, and we're doing this in groups around the world, what we find is that it's thousands of years old, but it's only a few days deep. We literally come together in the level of truth and love, and within 3 to 5 days, those shackles reveal themselves to be made of clay, and they begin to fall away because they cannot withstand the twin forces of truth and love. And I'll add humility here, because I love that humility came up. When you were talking, Yeye, earlier, a thought came to me I've never had before. Instead of fretting about the returns on our investments, we should invest ourselves in returning to the source for our true wealth, which is the wisdom of the soul and the knowledge of the heart. And the heart basically connects us into that implicate order, into that, what I like to call the internet of the heart. And through that gateway of the heart, we connect to all life. And we come into a place of automatic humility when we realize that. And then we naturally ask inward, because we're connected to the stars and the planets, and we realize this is all living, and we are so privileged to be here. And how can we serve? And one of the ways that we found, one of the things we found so beautiful in our gender equity work is that there's a very foundational level of unity that emerges, where really the heart can cross the chasms and the gulfs of separation that the mind has created. And that is so profound when we experience that in the Jerry work, the gender equity and reconciliation work. I'll just give you one quote, because it came from a woman to the men after the men had showed up with such authenticity. And she said to them, "You have opened my heart in ways I didn't even know it was closed." And another woman said that when this kind of work opens up galaxies within me, that's a very key quote, because what does that mean? It's opening up to the implicate order that leads to that identity of cosmological identity. Each one of us is an instantiation of the whole, but it becomes a living reality. The veils drop away. We see each other soul to soul, and we see the infinitude of love across these divisions that are human-made and are false. So, yeah, thank you.
That's great, Will. And I just want to, in a way, what you just described is the precise way in which male-female relationships, men and women, when that shifts, then everything shifts, because how men have tended to, in patriarchal societies, have tended to relate to women has been as objects, while subjectivity is held by the men. And if we can move into a communion of subjects, as Thomas Berry put it, rather than a universe that's seen as a collection of objects, once one makes a fundamental change, such as how men and women relate to each other, everything else can open up too, and our tender relationship and relationality to all forms of nature and to the galaxies and the cosmos, that those doors open up as well. It's all closely interrelated.
Absolutely. And our kind of mainstream scientific worldview objectifies the cosmos and reduces the planets to just big balls of gas and rock circulating a gigantic hydrogen bomb called the sun. And that is so utterly paltry compared to the living reality that we actually live bathed in the consciousness, the super consciousness of these beings. And we don't even know what they are, but we can relate to them, and we discover through this archetypal cosmology that they live in us. Yeah.
Yes. You know, I'm just feeling called to bring in Martin Luther King Jr. here, who said, "Love is the greatest force in the universe. It's the heartbeat of the moral cosmos."
Teish and Jude, I see you nodding your heads furiously. What you thinking?
Well, I often talk about this emergent understanding as the science of love, because it is showing us, as universal wisdom teachings always have, as you say, that love is the most profound underpinning force of the whole world. But I also just wanted to add something about this moment. And again, to go back to the astrology of this moment, because I've loved watching Changing of the Gods. But it seems to me that we are being supported in our conscious evolution, this invitation to consciously evolve by the entire universe, by Gaia, who's had enough, as Kenny, you said, but also by our entire solar system, as essentially a soul of consciousness. So I'm wondering if Rick would like to add anything to this once Yeye has spoken, because I've noticed energetically the difference of how Pluto has been moving into Aquarius, and this pulsing backwards and forwards. And it seems to me that not only the archetypes themselves, but their positioning and therefore their dynamic relationships is really key to how their influences support those sort of transformational changes that we're speaking of. So I'd love Yeye's perspective, but I'd love to perhaps hear a couple of minutes from Rick, if that might be possible, about this progressive movement of Pluto, you know, into Aquarius.
Well, you know, the two things that I want to say is I have spent 45 years as spirituality as a female specialist, we could say, you know, illuminating the divine feminine. And word has come to us through the oracles recently that it's time for the divine feminine and the sacred masculine to dance together. It's that time for us to do that kind of balance. And what was coming to my mind is the flight of the Sankofa bird. We have an image of a bird that is looking behind it with a egg in its mouth, but it's flying forward. Okay, so we need to take a look at that which is most potent from the past, from the indigenous point of view, and fly forward with it, you know. And I think that this work of re-inspiriting our consciousness and connecting with all that is really going on in the universe. Now, I'm gonna take a moment to be vain here and say that as a priestess of Oshun, who is our love goddess, I can guarantee you that she is the most potent force in the universe. Have no doubt about it, baby. Have no doubt about it.
Or we can add Teish's authority as the climax of the long mystical traditions that have held that principle, like Dante, as the love that moves the cosmos.
Right.
Yeah. I'll just responding to Jude's prompt there. That's the extraordinary thing about having tracked carefully over the centuries the ways in which the great archetypal patterns that are visible in history in coincidence with the movements of the planets. That on the one hand, these are cycles that keep repeating themselves. Each, Pluto goes around every 248 years. Saturn goes around every 29 and a half years. The sun goes around, or appears to go around, the Earth goes around the sun every year. And the moon every month. And so these each have their have a kind of cyclical, there is a kind of repetition. And the ancients often thought of it as just being a repeating cycle. And what a tracking of history shows is that there is both a cyclical and an evolutionary movement together. And these are working together. And more than that, that there is a quality of a moral evolution that's at work. Not that it's constantly, every day is better than the day before, or that every aspect of human behavior is clearly on a higher moral plane than yesterday or 100 years ago. Not at all. But as the great quote that Martin Luther King and Obama and others have taken from Theodore Parker, the 19th century transcendentalist and feminist and abolitionist. Theodore Parker said, I can't see everything with perfect clarity. We're always seeing through a certain darkness, but as far as I can see, there is an arc of the moral universe.
Yeah.
And it is long, but it is bending towards justice. And there does seem to me to be an evolution of consciousness that is being supported by the cosmos itself. And even the crisis of the Earth today, and in a sense, humanity is being put through an initiatory process, a kind of confrontation with dying, both literally and dying to our old identity, dying to our old constrained worldview. And so in some sense, the universe itself seems to be supporting this spiritual, moral transformation in our historical development. And we see this playing out quite clearly. I tried to give evidence for that in Cosmos and Psyche, and it's there quite clearly, I think, in the film series Changing of the Gods, that there is It's not just that the planets and the Earth are all moving around the sun in eternal cycles. That sun is moving through the cosmos. There's a spiral movement, and it's as if there does seem to me to be a morally and spiritually meaningful evolution that is taking place, that humanity, as Will was saying, as the drop that the ocean is in, humanity's playing a role in that too. It's not just happening of its own accord. Our agency, our capacity for opening our heart, sometimes through painful experience, opening our heart to greater love, is a crucial, is playing a crucial role in this larger evolution. The Earth wants us to, and the cosmos wants us to flourish. And that,
Teach had to hop off to go teach a class, but we'll carry on for just a few more minutes as we wrap up. And Rick, I love where you're leading us about flourishing, that the universe is inviting us to participate in this evolutionary flourishing. And indeed, it is only through the heart that we can participate in this and that we can touch eternity, right? And I think, Will, you would agree that our hearts are fractals of the universal heart. So let's embody that as we go forward, everyone. And Kenny, before I wrap it up, I'd love to just pass it to you for any final thoughts.
Well, what a joy and what an honor, and I've learned so much, and this has been so much fun to be with everyone, even virtually. I hope we all get together in person someday. And thank you. This is just beautiful. One thing that came to mind as you were talking, Will, is you may have heard the saying, behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes. Speaking of the divine feminine. But, you know, I guess for me, what's so important is how we translate this worldview into action. I do encourage people to check out Pioneers as well as the film. I hope you, of course, get a chance to look at the film and tell everybody you know and don't know. But Pioneers reflects a lot of the kinds of work that you've been hearing about here today. And Will and his wife, Cynthia Bricks, will actually be doing an online training around gender equity and reconciliation. We do rights of nature training. So if you want to learn how to get involved, you can. And there's a long list of things like that. It's a new project we have called Pioneers Learning. So I just want to encourage people, whatever you do, you know, follow your heart and you can't go wrong, and find the people that you want to be with and what really, you know, awakens you and you care about the most deeply. And, you know, your heart will open up a way for it to all come into being. So get involved. That's the main thing. And again, I just thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you, Kenny. And maybe I'll just add, behind every great person is a cosmic being working through them.
Yes.
The one cosmic being working through them. Thank you so much. This was such a joy to be with all of you today.
It really was. And I'll just say a final few words to our viewers. And thank you, viewers, for feeling called to join us at the kitchen table. Really, we honor you for making time for this. And if you haven't seen the film, you can visit changingofthegods.com to learn more. I know some of you have been asking in the chat where to find the film. changingofthegods.com. Also, the first episode is available for free on YouTube, so definitely check that out. And continue to tell your friends and colleagues, right? It's meaningful media that needs to seed into the collective. And, you know, I just want to thank again our wonderful guests. What fun this has been, and what diverse viewpoints we've brought. And I have to say, it's almost painful to end because we're just scratching the surface, right? I mean, we forged a few trailheads, and there's higher that we could go.
Thank the Holomovement again, the Holomovement initiative, so much for helping to sponsor this. And if you've not seen the book, if you liked what you saw here, there's a lot more where that came from. So highly recommend the book.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Kenny. And really, I can't say enough good things about the book and all of the luminaries who are sharing their wisdom in here. And I also want to shout out the Organization for Professional Astrology and Jennifer Freed Astrology for helping to get the word out about this webinar. Thank you so much. And I think that about does it.
Well, I
Anything
just wonder, Jude, Will, or Rick, do you have any brief parting words you'd like to share?
Well, this is just a humorous note, perhaps, but I'm thinking how when Will said that, combine the sequence of behind every great man is a woman rolling her eyes, and then behind every human being, every person is the cosmos coming through them, and probably also behind every human being, the cosmos sometimes is rolling its eyes.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
I'll just add, that's good. I'll just add one thing, because we do live in very challenging times and it's easy to get into despair. But I want to just remind us all of something Martin Luther King said so powerfully, because he was addressing the fact that human beings are capable of unspeakable evils. But he also said that we are capable of unspeakably grand and glorious love. And the way he put it was, if we do not balance our pessimism about human nature with an optimism about divine nature, then we overlook the cure of grace. And the cure of grace is the power of love working through the collective. And so we can draw on that and consciously become its instruments.
Beautiful.
Wow.
That's just really great.
Will, do you
Perfect
think we could
quote.
call that optimisticism?
That's nice. I like that. Optimisticism. That's a good one.
Cosmic optimism.
I think
right.
I think this also gives us authentic hope. You know, this is grounding us in the realization that unity is our existential reality. It is grounding us in the potential to come together in radical collaboration as a Holomovement. And it is an invitation of the cosmos. And just to go back to what Rick and we're all saying, is not to forget we have so much support. It can often feel lonely, it can often feel discouraging, but when we realize, when we remember that this is the invitation of the universe to us, this is the invitation of Gaia to us, this is the invitation of all the archetypes to us, we have so much support. So let's call on it and let's link up and lift up together and go forward together. Because
and that's why we're optimistics.
Exactly, optimistics.
And as David Orr said, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up.
Exactly.
Oh, good one.
That's good.
Good
That's
one.
good.
Love it. Excellent.
All right.
Get those sleeves rolled up.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And
Thank
we
you.
hope to do more around the kitchen table, the cosmic kitchen table. Blessings, everybody.
Thank
Lots
you.
of love, everyone.
Lots of love.
Much love. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.